Добрий день, друзі, вітаю.
Good afternoon, dear friends. Welcome to Ukraine Media Center. We are supported by the Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. We are hosted by Skyloft Hotel. I would like to thank them for hosting us. And right now, we have Oleksandr Kornienko with us online, first deputy speaker of the Verkhovna Rada, the Parliament of Ukraine. Can you hear us? Yes. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. Mr. Kornienko, we saw that yesterday there was a plenary session of the Verkhovna Rada, so please, if possible, could you tell us which decisions were made there? We have worked in a rather productive way. There have been a number of decisions made. Those were about security matters and changes to the budget. We increased by 200 billion hryvnias the reserve fund of the state budget. This is the only way to provide the government with a possibility to quickly fund the armed forces of Ukraine and Ministry of Internal Affairs and all those entities under that ministry, like the emergency service and border service. About social security issues, we have simplified the assignment of unemployment benefits, and now international organizations have are possible to buy medicines for Ukraine because the term had to come to an end soon, so we would be without medicines. The military martial law has been extended for 1 month until the 25th of May. The president has proposed that in his decree, and we said, okay, there is nothing to discuss. We just have to extend it to properly regulate it. We see that the enemy does not stop, so we should not stop either in working on the laws that we need. There is another very important law that we approved, and I'd like to thank colleagues for approving it on the whole. It's about changes to the legal regulatory regime on temporarily occupied territories, because over these 2 months in certain districts of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, their status has actually changed, and we see that all our previous legislation has been irrelevant by now. There have been a number of draft laws of more, say, point-targeted nature. For example, if somebody gives military equipment to the state, those amounts would not be taxed. 1 month ago, we established those thresholds, which are rather big. There are those big amounts, and it would probably not the right thing to tax those amounts. We have also made some foundation for the future, so to say. We have passed some laws in the first hearing, and soon we will approve them as a whole. About the future, Mr. Kornienko, in your view, what are the most urgent decisions to be made right now by you, the Parliament? We have some draft laws about the economy. Unfortunately, yesterday the draft law on privatization was not supported. I think we will get back to that issue again. We have to work on improving our regulatory regimes, and there are various opinions now about how to introduce zoning of our territories. There are territories where there are certain tax regulation regimes. It's first of all about bringing income to the state budget. This is basically on top. We all see the situation with the budget at the moment, and of course there are military matters. If there are any issues that appear, as our experience shows, most of such draft laws are developed and passed immediately by all factions. It consolidates people. There is discussion about regulating local activities. We have some issues about local self-government and how it should operate in this situation, especially near the front line. There are military administrations, military-civil administrations, and we have to understand how this interdependency will work and how it will be regulated. We understand that maybe there are some legislative initiatives about administrative changes, because we see that some oblasts have been completely destroyed, damaged. Others, for example, have faced a challenge whereby they have to accept a huge number of IDPs, internally displaced people. Are there any initiatives in this area? Well, I would not say they're administrative matters, because even in peaceful time, administrative issues were painful, well, sensitive. We have to be cautious about those. We understand that, territorial communities and boundaries of those communities and which towns and villages are parts of each communities. I think that definitely it will be reviewed sooner or later, because we understand that the way we created those territorial communities several years ago, it's now not always possible to work in that way, even around Kyiv. But now it's not the right time to consider those issues. What is more relevant now is about types of territories. Now we have the draft law now in the Committee on Local Self-Government, and jointly with Ministry of Regional Development we work on that. It's about zoning the territories. We discussed that zoning even before, be it 9 zones, 12 zones, and how they should be supplied, which taxes they should pay. And now this is just an urgent necessity, because now we clearly see that there are some zones which are far from the front lines, closer to the front lines, and those at the front line. And we cannot apply the same approaches to different territories with very different circumstances, economically, logistically, demographically. They're different, because we understand that there's this naturally people are moving to the west, and we have to review all those things. We will be working on that. Those are concurrent tasks of a more systemic nature, and they are more about our vision how to restore our infrastructure, how to restore our country. Mr. Kornienko, we have got a number of questions about the decision that was made by the National Security and Defense Council about terminating activities, terminating pro-Russian parties. And in that regard, I would like to ask you, now we see some sort of reincarnation of that opposition Platform for Life party. Now it is Platform for Life and Peace. In your view, are there any legislative mechanisms to resolve those issues which we face not for the first time? Yes, now the Platform for Life became Platform for Life and Peace. In the Ukrainian abbreviation, there is a different order of letters, but whatever way you put those letters, there is the same word finally, as we joke. Well, but there are two aspects. One of them is legal and practical, about implementing the decision of the National Security and Defense Council, and that should be implemented by the Ministry of Justice. And we as Parliament members, according to our legislation, those cases of prohibition of 15 parties should be submitted to the District Administrative Court of the city of Kyiv. And that's a notorious court. It's well known in many aspects, first of all, negative ones, and we would not like to get a bad result there. So we prepared a draft law with our colleagues, which regulates these matters and transfer those cases to a different court, which is located Administrative Court of Cassation in the city of Lviv. And soon we'll vote for that draft law. Of course, this draft law has drawn attention. People submitted their proposals. So it's not about thousands of amendments. Can you hear me? Mr. Kornienko, can you hear us? I see that we have some connection problems. Now you're back with us. So where did we stop? We heard you, but then the video. Well, I will just I'll then answer the second aspect of your question, which is about the moral and ethical aspect. Now we already see that there is so-called popular illustration where members of local councils quickly change names of their factions, some of them to Platform for Peace and Life, some of them in different ways. So I think in the next election, this popular illustration will put bring it to an end. The people is the best source of frustration, and we'll overcome it jointly. Mr. Kornienko, speaking about local councils, with regard to this decision of the Security and Defense Council, what's happening there in local councils? Is there already any decision, any mechanism how to support, maintain operation of local councils where there was a high percentage of deputies from those prohibited parties? Well, there are several approaches. There will be a draft law which will be submitted and passed after the law on prohibition of parties. We have a problem with quorums. Indeed, we are a lot of local councils, about 40 local councils, which will not have a quorum if those members, those deputies, are withdrawn. And under the Constitution, we cannot withdraw parliament members when the party is prohibited, but in local councils they can be withdrawn. What to do then? Should we reduce the number of members in those local councils, or should we reduce those thresholds, those quorum numbers? We are discussing it a lot, and of course a lot of those deputies of those local council members have already changed their allegiance, they renamed their groups, but there are issues. Now we have been working on that draft law about the prohibition of parties as such. And then we will be working on the situation in local councils. And I cannot exclude that in some communities which are near the front line, for some time we should drop local self-government altogether, although local self-government is very important and it's guaranteed by the Constitution, and we ratified the European local self-government charter. And I work with decentralization with my colleagues, with Alexei Chernyshev, with Klitschko, with others, and it was painful for me to admit it, but we do have territories where it's just impossible to for local self-government to operate there, and we'll have to introduce direct rule there, first military, then military civil rule, and then the issue of those parties will be resolved too. Thank you, Mr. Kornienko. If you have any questions, dear journalists, you can ask those. There are no questions from the studio, so thank you for joining us. Thank you for finding time to join us. Thank you. Dear friends, stay with us. I'd like to remind you that at 3 p.m. in our studio we'll have Oleksandr Matuzyanek, the spokesman of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, who will tell us about current situation at the front lines. Thank you.